Now it's time for what will probably be your favorite part of this section, and that is learning how to make your calculator do all these problems for you. As I've said before, just because your calculator can do the work doesn't mean we're allowed to stop thinking. You really need to know the processes that are going on inside of your calculator. You really need to know what's happening behind the scenes for all of this. But once you kind of know how to do all these calculations, it makes sense to then offload those calculations to your device so that your device can do them for you, rather than just spending all your time tediously typing numbers in your calculator. You still have to understand what's happening, otherwise what goes into the calculator and what comes out of the calculator doesn't make any sense. But at any rate, we're going to learn how to do this, and this is going to be something that I believe you all really enjoy. So these notes are in your book on page 49, or in your notes on page 49, and it's pretty simple. You just find the stat button on your calculator. So you find the stat button, which for me is right here, and so I'll grab that stat button, and then you just scroll over to tests right up here. And now once you have tests, you have a whole list of tests, and we're going to use a couple more of these this semester, but really they're somewhat intuitive. And so as we scroll down and look through all these tests, you can see right away which ones we're going to want. We're going to want the z-test or the t-test. Which one are we using? Well, we're using a z-test whenever our test statistic is the z equals 2, and this is when sigma is known, and we use a t-test whenever sigma is unknown. So really, it's just whether we know sigma or don't know sigma. So if we know sigma or don't know sigma, then we choose our appropriate test. Okay, let's try two of the problems that we did before. So let's start with problem 9.6. And 9.6 is where we have a car dealership that knows that it sells. So if we start on 9.6, we have the car dealership that knows that it sells an average of 5-point cars with a standard deviation of 2.25. And so we know that our standard deviation, sigma, equals 2.25, so we're going to choose z-test for this one. So you grab your calculator, you go to that menu where we were just a second ago, hit enter on z-test, and you find this option. And now we have two options. We have a data option and a stats option. What's the difference? Stats is when we know the different things that go into our formulas. Data is when we have to calculate the things that go into our formulas. Well, this one is a stats problem, so hit enter on stats. And so what we've got here is we're going to choose the stats option, and the reason why we're going to choose the stats option is because the problem tells us what sigma, x bar, and mu, and all those are. Okay, so as we're doing this, what is mu naught? The mu naught is from your null hypothesis. So what is our null hypothesis for this problem? Our null hypothesis was that the number of cars sold was equal to 5. So we're going to put 5 in for mu naught. Now our sigma and x bar are read off of the problem. So sigma was 2.25. X bar was 160 over 30, and so that was the 5.33. And if you remember when we did that problem, we had to calculate our own x bar, but it was just finding the average. And finally, n is how many cars that show up, and we had 30 cars show up, so 30 is what's going to be, or 30 days, how many days we did, so how many times we did our study. We did our study 30 times, we had 30 days. Finally, we have to pick one of these. These are from our alternative hypothesis. And notice our alternative hypothesis was that mu was greater than 5, so we're going to choose the greater than option as we do it. So as you go through your calculator, make sure you get these things entered in correctly. I will enter them correctly in mine, so I'm going to do 5 right there, and then 2.25 right there, and then 5.333 right there, 30 right here. And now I'm going to scroll over to the mu naught and select that. So now everything's selected correctly, and I hit calculate. And when you hit calculate, look at the things we've got. We've got our z value, 0.8106, and I think that's pretty much what we got earlier. P-value 0.208, which is what we got earlier as well. So you can see our two values right here that there were the same values we got when we did the problem the long way. Okay, let's now jump over, and instead of doing 9.6, let's do our next problem, 9.7. Okay, so what are we going to do when we do problem 9.7? This is where we had that dealership that sold the cars, but notice that problem did not have a standard deviation. So for 9.7, we're going to have to choose t-test instead of z-test. So I'm going to get my calculator out again. I'm going to clear. I'm going to do stat tests, and this time I'm going to choose t-test. Now, again, we can choose data or stats. This time, well, we could plug in the average and standard deviation, but tell you what let's do. Let's choose data. And what data does is it lets us just tell it a list of values, and it will calculate those things for us. So data is useful when you have a list of values. Stats is useful when you know the average and you know kind of the standard deviation and the things to plug into our problem. So I'm going to just briefly escape from here and go back to stats, go back to edit, and look at my list of values. And what you'll see is that I have the numbers from this problem entered in because that was the last one I did in my calculator. So make sure the L1 are your car values they had from this problem. Go back to stats and go back to t-test, and we're going to choose data this time. Okay, so that means that for this problem, I'm going to select data, and that means I'm not telling it my average, I'm telling it where my list is located at. My list of data points was in L1, so I'm going to put L1 right here. My frequency is just going to be the number 1 because each of these numbers showed up only once. If you're in a situation like, for example, that problem where we were finding out how many stars a restaurant reviewed, and they had like 55 stars and 34 stars, then we might put this number of stars in list 1 and the frequency in list 2, so we might have an L2 here. This is not something that's going to happen in the textbook or on the test, but that's the case where you might use a different frequency. Okay, once again, this is from H naught. This is from H naught, and our H naught is that mu is equal to 5, and so that's 5. And then down here is from H1, and our H1 is that we were looking for mu greater than mu naught, so we were looking for whether or not we sold more. So these two numbers come from hypotheses. This is just our list of values. So let me get all that entered in here. You can see I have my data, I have my 5, I have my L1 up, everything's selected already. And so now I just hit calculate, and you'll see here's my T, 0.883 that I had earlier, and my P, 0.205 that I had earlier. So notice everything shows up, and it actually gives us the average and the standard deviation if we wanted. So there you go. That's how you can use your calculator to skip all of the work that we did on the last 4 problems, but please don't only use your calculator. Please understand the process, understand what goes into it, because I will want to see you go through the whole process at least once or twice through the course of the semester. But we have a calculator, so let's not pretend like they can't do this for us. So they can. It's a great resource to have. Great. Okay, well, this finishes a very long section, so I expect it to take you multiple days to work through this section and work through the problems. But hopefully you can do that, and hopefully it all starts to make sense after you spend some time on it. So good luck, and I'll see you again in study hall hours and on the next section in our notes.